That's my little cut-in addendum sound. So I did want to add a couple notes to this one really quickly. I'll put some article links in the show notes just to some of like the seminal CrossFit articles. Just kind of talk about the implementation of CrossFit and how it might not just be a single workout a day, even though that can be very effective. But also I think it's worth noting that the Strength plus Metcon craze, though it did precede, there were evidence of Strength plus Metcon in CrossFit.com and people doing this prior to 2008. The Strength plus Metcon craze really came out of 2008. One, the games events were short in duration. It had this Strength plus Metcon feel. There was an article that came out after that. I think it was called like Strength Bias Training. Note the name Strength Bias Training. And generally in CrossFit, we don't want to bias our training. But there's a Strength Bias Training article. I'll link that. That kind of really led to this popular craze of Strength plus Metcon. And I think what's really interesting about it is one of the reasons that we saw the 2008 CrossFit Games unfold the way it did is because originally they just had way more people sign up than they expected. And so they leaned the programming at the CrossFit Games toward a much shorter time domain, heavier lift style incorporated in there. And I think part of this was due because they were just trying to logistically make the games happen and get everybody through without running heats till all hours of the night. So it's kind of interesting to look at it in that context. I don't think the games is the only place to derive sort of theoretical programming approach, but it is always interesting to see what happens in the open in the games and how that trickles down into our gym. And I think it's also really important to remember that the points performance of the movements aren't based off of the judging standards at the games. Sometimes the two coincide, but they don't always coincide. And a great example of this is when they had the hand release push-up. I've talked about this before, come out in the open. All of a sudden, that's the only version of a push-up I saw people in gyms doing. And as we all know, CrossFit demands a whole lot more of you. CrossFit demands you can do push-ups, hand release push-ups. You could do handstand push-ups. You guys get the idea. Same thing with pull-ups. Can you do kipping pull-ups, chest-to-bar pull-ups, strict chest-to-bar pull-ups, butterfly pull-ups? Can you do L pull-ups, pull-ups at different grip widths? Can you do a legless rope climb? But this is a really important piece here is there are rare cases in CrossFit, aside from the points of performance for a specific movement, range of motion standards, there are not many cases in CrossFit where, well, there are, but where the game standard is what dictates exactly how the movement should be done everywhere else. I think it's something that's important to keep in mind. Anyway, just wanted to add that on. And now let's talk about programming. All right, driving home from the gym. This is my third time trying to record this podcast. Woke up this morning to coach the 5:30 and 6:30 a.m. at CrossFit Mafia. Was all fired up to talk about this after reading about it on Reddit and podcasting about it last week on the CrossFit channel. I love talking about this topic of programming. Got in the car, bam, started recording, feeling good, dogs were sleeping. We're driving down the highway and then got to class, coach class. And the more I thought about the podcast I recorded, the more I didn't like it. And then I was going to record it on the way home, driving home from the gym, and then started re-recording it, and then didn't like that. And I think one of the problems is I was giving this sucker too much preamble, spending too much time talking about nothing. And here's the deal. I was on Reddit reading about someone just giving their opinion on programming. Their opinion that they like doing the strength plus Metcon style programming more than they like doing a single strength workout in a gym or a single monostructural workout in the gym. And they had actually, for Reddit and the intellectual bastion that it is, they had a pretty even-handed approach. They were basically just saying it's like more like a flavor. It's like I see the upsides of both, the coaching benefits of each one, the fitness benefits of each one, the fun and excitement benefits of each one, but they just said they prefer one more than the other. And then there was actually some pretty even-handed discussion throughout. And the arguments kind of bounced all over the place. The main argument behind the one workout a day is that people say this is the CrossFit way. This is CrossFit as it was intended to be. This allows for the most effective amount of coaching in a class. This still gives us desirable physical adaptation and fitness improvements. The arguments behind the Strength plus Metcon is that it's more exciting. It makes the class more full. athletes get more out of it. And those are some of the arguments behind that piece. And here's the deal. The more I'm reading through this, the more I've thought about this, talking about it on last week's CrossFit podcast, is that they are all wrong, and they're also a little bit right. Now, why do I say that? And I feel pretty strongly about this. I think the province of one workout a day is that if all you want to do in order to see benefits to your GPP for a lifetime, for the majority of people, all you have to do is warm up, work out, cool down 5 to 6 days a week. Scale it when you need to, but basically one workout a day, 5 to 6 days a week. Vary the workouts, vary the intensity, vary the loading and the movements. And I would bet along a lot that you'll get fitter for a lifetime, if that's all you want to do. And I think this is really important for us to understand, is that the one workout a day is in itself an effective dose. Especially if you meet the other tenets of the program, that is, you strive for a relative intensity, you use functional movements, you test benchmarks, you assess, you program weaknesses, when needed, you avoid biasing your programming and training. One workout a day will do that. And that's really nice, because I think most of us who go to the gym, and this is me now more than I ever was, don't want to spend 2 hours in a gym. Don't want to have a lot to think about when it comes to training. We want to keep it really simple. We want to get in the gym, get warmed up, get sweaty, maybe improve on my movement, do a workout, talk some shit, high five, chest bump, go home. This will work. The other thing the one workout a day really does allow for is it does allow for a significant amount of coaching. So if you have a coach who's really involved and integrated, not just a rep caller or a cheerleader, but can continually help you improve throughout that class, it's a pretty enjoyable, challenging, rewarding experience. Okay, so that's what I believe. Second thing, strength plus metcon. To the point that is strength plus metcon is not CrossFit, personally, I feel like it's a really bad argument. And I honestly feel like it's not true. Why do I say that? Well, I say that for a lot of reasons. I say that, one, if you historically look at CrossFit's programming, there are plenty of examples of utilizing strength plus metcon in the programming. Second example is when you look at how we've tested CrossFit in the past, especially in the open, which I would argue is an opportunity that is accessible to a very large set of CrossFitters, not just the ultra elite competitors or even the mid to high level competitors. The open tests, strength plus metcon. Sometimes metcon plus strength. Sometimes the open tests, skill plus strength or skill plus metcon. And we see this at different levels of competition. So I think there's evidence there. But probably the two most powerful arguments why I think we need to get over this hump of just always shitting on either one workout a day or strength plus metcon is that if you go back to the early theoretical CrossFit articles, and this is not to say CrossFit is not dogmatic. It's meant to use the data of results of athletes to slightly tweak the programming. There are some core ingredients, right? The core ingredients are the functional movements, the intensity, the variance, and the scalability. But if you look at some of the theoretical articles, the early What is Fitness articles, it talks about implementation of CrossFit. It talks about, yes, you absolutely can do a strength or a skill followed by a metcon performed at a blistering pace on one day, and on the next day, maybe you just do like a interval workout or a metcon, and the third day, maybe you do a blend of the first 2 days. The point being is that routine is the enemy. Variance is the goal when it comes to spreading the results we get from intensity as far and wide as possible. So I don't really buy into this narrative like strength plus metcon is not pure CrossFit. I think it's a pretty uneducated and dogmatic approach. In the same way that I think it's a pretty uneducated, dogmatic approach to say single modality days or single element days aren't effective, or that is the only way, or that is pure CrossFit. I think it's absolute nonsense. Now, ultimately, what is the best way? Well, I do think the best way is the way that gets the athletes in your gym results. And it gets them It gives you an opportunity to help them achieve those results by being a quality coach. So what that ultimately means is, hey, if you are going to run Strength Plus Metcons and you want to be someone who can also improve your athletes by coaching, because that's what they're really paying you for, that's how you can differentiate, you have to be a pretty capable coach to do that in a Strength Plus Metcon class. You have to do smart things like make sure the strength at least matches up with some of the neurological, if not perfectly matches up with the movements that we're going to use in the Metcon. I've seen it before where people are like, all right, so we're going to do a heavy power clean as the strength, and the Metcon is going to be handstand walks and muscle ups. And it's like, yeah, is it doable? Is it efficient? No. Is it really challenging for you as a coach to get people better through coaching that way? No. Is CrossFit program even applied poorly? Even if you don't fucking coach a thing, CrossFit's still going to get people better if they show up and be consistent. And I think that's also one of the challenges of CrossFit. And I'll never forget this, listening to Connor Murphy talk about this. Incredible coach. He's gone through all the steps of becoming an incredible coach. He went from being a bad coach to a good coach to a great coach, to a lifetime learner of a coach. But he came up and did a level 2. He was coaching down at St. Thomas at the time, Reebok CrossFit St. Thomas. He came up to Boston, did a level 2, and I remember him saying, he's like, down at St. Thomas, all my athletes love me. We have a great time. They're getting fitter. They're doing great. And he said, I came up to my level 2 and I realized what my strengths were in the level 2, but he's also said, I realized what all of my deficits were. And he said, more importantly, what I realized is my athletes were getting better just because CrossFit's effective. They weren't getting better because I was a good coach. And that's the other thing that's really deceptive about this. Your athletes can get better off just one workout a day. They can get better. Wow, he said it. They can get better off Strength Plus Metcon. They will get the best off of you being a great coach, analyzing the program that you implement, and looking at, is that programming keeping my athletes healthy? Does it allow them to stay safe? Do they get results, and do they get results in a time frame that's reasonable for them in my gym? And I just can't say this enough, and maybe I thought I had more to talk about with this, but I just can't say this enough, how important that is. And when we get stuck into this concept of there's only one way to do CrossFit, I think coaches and, CrossFit philosophers, we really shoot ourselves in the foot. Now, one of the other questions I would often get asked when we talk about this, the level 1s, level 2s, and we talk about the importance of doing the single workout a day and why that was important. A lot of coaches would ask us things like, well, my gym does Strength Plus Metcon, or we have multiple element parts. How do I get back to doing a single element day? And I think one of the simplest ways is you just start by doing it. You make a plan around it. And you understand that there is some flexibility. The warm-up is a powerful thing. You don't always just have to cram more into a class via volume or via intensity. And you also don't have to beat them to death with the PVC pipe with a 45-minute long skill progression with only PVC. You can do a general warm-up. You can start with the PVC pipe. Then you can go through some things with some lightweight, like clean shrugs or clean pulls, or just practicing the front squat and rack position before you build up to 8x2 cleans on just a heavy day. We need to think broader as coaches, and we need to understand that what has made CrossFit so successful is, while it has very clear core ingredients, ultimately its applicability and the development of its applicability comes down to us looking at, okay, how did I use the ingredients? How did I combine them? What was the outcome? At the end of the day, it's not about whose programming looks the sexiest or has the most or least parts to it. It's about the programming that helps you get your athletes to be consistent. It's about the programming that gives you a platform to coach your athlete. It's about programming that helps lead your athletes to results. And in my experience, it's not only one workout a day. Though that can be really effective for probably a lifetime. It's not only Strength Plus Metcon, though that can be effective too. And a coach who has their shit together can have no problem getting through all the elements of class and making sure athletes get coached and improve across those elements and can follow along and are warmed up appropriately. It's about having a variety of these pieces and implementing them in slightly different ways, using that variance over the long term. And I feel pretty strongly about that. That's kind of the world according to me on programming. I would like that we talk about programming in a more nuanced ways. I'm also really sensitive to all the discussions out there of people who say, well, my members they won't come in for a single modality day. I do believe this comes down to coaches, the attitude in the gym, how often you share those kind of workouts with members, coach those kind of workouts to members, coach them well to members. And the other reason I kind of feel strongly about the variance here, and you don't only have to do strength plus metcon or only one workout a day, is that, like I was saying here, after last week I was hearing a lot of gripes and groans in the gym. We had done one benchmark every week for the last 4 or 5 weeks. The workouts were, ratcheting up in complexity. Some of them were multi-part, not all of them. But it was a challenging couple weeks of programming. And this week we really switched things up. Like I said, not necessarily made it an easier week, but there was an opportunity to chase intensity in different ways this week, whether it was through movement practice or loading. And it was apparent to me, at least what I saw in my limited view, that athletes really enjoyed this compared to the last week. They're excited to get back to something different next week. But it truly is, ultimately the variety that I think is really powerful and interesting. And when people talk about CrossFit being fun, I always think about a member I used to coach. His name was Hill up in Boston. And he used to say, what I love about CrossFit is it's a different challenge every single day. And the other part I would add to that is I think for people is a good coach makes it an accessible challenge every single day. And that's where I think, for me, that's where the fun comes from. I think for athletes. For me, really, the fun is just showing up and it's social hour, just bullshitting, being a terrible student. We'll talk about that in a different podcast. So my goal with that one is to hopefully broaden some viewpoints on what kind of programming is and isn't CrossFit. There's a lot of strong feelings out there. But if you look at, the thousands of gyms all over the world applying the main ingredients of CrossFit a little bit differently and still getting results, having thriving communities, I really hope that tones down, is a soothing balm to the fire of the dogmatism that pops up when we just want to have one specific way. What is the truth? And best way to do it. Truth is, routine is the enemy, and you can get a lifetime of results through constantly varied functional movements, executed at high intensity, and coached really well. So that's what we got today, talking a little bit about programming, and I think I like this one. I think I'll keep this one. We'll get it out there. This might be like a part one of multi-parts, because maybe I'll get some comments on this one, have more to talk about. It's something people love to talk about, and I like talking about it. So there it is. Have a great day. Get your fitness in, whether it's one workout, 2 parts, or something totally different. And we'll talk to you soon.